Welcome. Today we're going to assemble and install the Valco PEAK Poult Feeder and winch system. Some of the features of this system is that we have the flood windows at the top of the tower. That's going to produce a mountain of feed that will be created for the easy access of poults to get to that feed. The winch system is designed to actuate the feed level cones. The winch can be run on any 1 3/4 tube, whether it be smooth or ribbed. The system's also designed to be 200 foot long at the max, so 100 feet on each side of the winch system.
Ready to set up your winch system. You're going to install your home run line. At the end of each home run line, we're going to use the Valco cast pulley. When you install your drop pulleys, you're going to install your drop pulleys either on 8 or 10 foot centers based on what your truss system is like in the barn. And then you'll hang your pulleys and run your drop lines and attach them to your hanger.
When you're putting your hangers onto the tube, you want to note that one leg on the hanger is longer than the other one. You want to index your tube rib to the short side and install it just like this. That'll hold all your tubes in alignment, and it will align your holes to the bottom side of the feed tube.
Okay, next we're going to talk about a double back system. So in this case, our drop pulley is closer to the winch than what we actually need to lift. To install the double back system, you're going to install an idler pulley that's going to be at least the distance that you're going to drop to the floor, at least that distance from the winch or further. So once you have this idler pulley in place, you're going to attach the drop cable to the home run line. You're going to thread it through the idler pulley. Then you're going to drop that through your drop pulley and then down to the feed line. In your winch system, you're going to need to make individual level adjustments for each drop cable. So we're going to use the Valco cable clamp, which is adjustable. So in order to put this on, you're going to thread your drop line through the top hole, down through your hanger, and then thread it through the labyrinth here to get it clamped tight. In order to make individual level adjustments at each drop cable, we're going to take the cable clamp and we're just going to tilt it. We're going to hold one end of the cable and we're going to tilt it so that we can adjust the wire down or up, depending on how you have to adjust it. And when you let go, it'll clamp itself in place. So we're going to start with the assembly of the turkey starter feeder. This one has the flood windows in it. To start the assembly, we're going to take the feed cone and we're going to just thread the cables through, and you'll feed it through so that the end stop falls into there. Okay, next we're going to just set the cone with the cables onto the feed pan, set the tower inside, and then I'll thread the cables through the top of the cage on these slots on each side. So when assembling the cage to the pan, be aware that there's a little clip that this goes on the inside of the pan lip and this clip goes on the outside. So we'll start by clipping one end in. We'll get the lip on the inside and we'll clip the outside so it looks just like that. Next, we're just going to put the clips on the whole way around and we'll just clip them in over the lip. And I push a little bit on here just to take the slack out so that when I get to the other end, the two ends are just a little bit closer and I don't have to pull quite as hard. After I have the inside clip in and before I clip the outside one, I'll just adjust this latch so it's aligned and I'll clip that in
And then we just need to slide these together to get the latch to latch. Next, we're going to assemble the feeder onto the feed tube. We'll need the assembled feeder that we just put together and the drop tube retaining cap. So this here, couple things. I like to put all these end clips on the same side of the feed line, just because they're handy if I happen to need to walk a line and do anything, everything's on the same side. So we're gonna come to where the feed hole is. So we're gonna start by clipping this onto the feed tube. And I'll just go a slight angle to miss that clip, the alignment tab, clip it in. Then your top retaining cap just slides in. It has some grooves that have to align here with the tower, and it has retaining clips. When we get to that part of the slide, we'll just depress these. So we'll line this up, slide it into that point. We'll just depress those and get them past the start of the tower, and then just slide that in and it's locked in place. In order to remove the retaining cap, we're just going to depress the clips on both sides. So we'll just depress that, and I'll just use my thumb to press the cap off and slide it out. And at that point, we should be able to pop this off. Then the last step of the ratchet assembly is to put the handle on. Half-inch nut, it is slotted, so you just have to align the slots on the shaft. So the last thing I'll do is I'll put the cable clamp on the winch, and I won't tighten it, it's just to get pre-assembled before we put the cable in. That just goes in these two holes on the winch. The next step is to put this winch assembly onto the feed tube. The winch assembly is held on with 4 of the standard clamps for the pipe. Each clamp goes over a tab, and you just tighten these clamps up, and it will fold the tabs around the shape of the tube. To string the cabling for the winch, we're using a solid wire. That wire is threaded through each of the feeders and underneath these pipe clamps. So you want to pay attention to that. The solid wire is not going to stretch quite as much as if you use a cable, but a cable is acceptable. When you connect the winch to the solid wire, you're going to use a section of cable, and you're going to get 2 to 3 wraps around the winch spool. Thread it through the first feeder, and then when you get to the wire, I like to use 2 clamps to connect the cable to the solid wire. Okay, when you connect the cable to the end, you can't really put it on the far side of the last or the first feeder because there's not enough room for winching. So what we've done is we've taken one of our pipe clamps and we've drilled a hole in it so the spring will go through, and then we connect our wire to this spring, and then we'll be able to come up here and put our clamp on the pull cables right here. On the drive end, we're going to have an assembly that holds the anti-shock wire. So when you connect the spring for the winch, you're just going to connect it through this bolt on the bottom side. Here, I used a little piece of cable to connect the spring to the hard wire, and I used 2 clamps to secure those 2 together. Before we connect the cones for each feeder, I like to take the tension out of the line. I like to just put a little bit of tension on the pull cable, and you can see here we just extended the spring slightly. To attach each of the cone pull cables, we have the tension out of the wire, and we'll set the cones on the bottom of the feed pan, and then we'll use a clamp to clamp it to the hard wire, and we'll just pull it enough that it doesn't lift the cone off the bottom of the pan. Next, we're going to talk about the anti-roost wire and the installation. We're going to put that on spring on the isolator first. I've already made a loop in the wire, so I'll hook that on there. And I'll just work my way down through each of the towers and hook this in. Okay, when we get to the winch, we're going to have to run the anti-roost wire over the winch. So we have 3 isolators. So we're just going to thread this under the first one over the top and then back down through the bottom one. And then after that, we'll just continue to work them down through the towers. The last step is to terminate the anti-roost wire at the other end. Again, we'll thread it through the isolator and just make a loop, and then we'll tension this to put a little bit of tension on this spring. Pull that tight. Okay, when you're ready to feed, you want to make sure that your cones are all the way down. You'll be able to see the windows where the feed will come in, and it will flood the pan at that point. If you need to adjust the control pan limit switch, you'll want to go to the link that we have referenced on the screen. Prior to taking the feed system out of flood mode, typically you'll let the birds eat the mound of feed down a little bit. It just takes a little bit of pressure off the cabling and the cones to make the lift smoother. Now that we've prepared for taking the system out of flood mode, we're just going to crank the handle and lift the cones up until we have the windows closed, and you can see that here.